The first 3 rows, wrapped in white ribbon, stayed empty. I walked the aisle alone, my heels counting every unsent apology. The next morning, my phone buzzed, not congratulations, but a text from my father. Send your brother $9,200. I sent back exactly $1 and blocked him. A week later, he showed up at my house with the cops. My name is Courtney Barry. I am 34 years old, and on my wedding day, I learned the precise geometry of absence. The heavy oak doors of the old Port Wyndham Cathedral groaned open, not with celebration, but with a mechanical finality. It was my cue. 148 pairs of eyes turned toward me, their faces soft and blurred by the expectant hush. The organ swelled, a sound so large it seemed to physically push me forward, but my feet felt weighted, as if I were wading through deep water. I am a rescue pilot for the Coastal Response Authority. I fly a high-performance helicopter into the teeth of coastal storms. I am trained to compartmentalize, to operate under extreme duress, to run checklists while the world screams and shatters around me. My pulse remains steady when I'm hovering 40 feet above a sinking trawler, the rotor wash whipping the Atlantic into a frenzy. I know how to focus on the objective. My objective now was the man waiting at the end of the aisle, Evan. But my training failed me. My eyes, disciplined to scan instruments and horizon, were drawn magnetically to the left, to the front 3 pews. They were pristine, the white satin ribbons, tied in perfect, ostentatious bows at each aisle entry, cordoned off nothing. They were empty, not just empty, but aggressively, pointedly vacant. 3 rows, 18 seats, reserved for the Barry family, my family. My father, Leon, my mother, Darla, my brother, Tyler, aunts, uncles, cousins who had confirmed their attendance, all of them, gone. It was not an absence, it was an amputation. The sunlight, streaming through the high, arched, stained glass, cut across the aisle in sharp, theatrical shafts. It was less a blessing, more a spotlight. I felt the heat of it on my bare shoulders, an interrogation lamp demanding to know why I was here, alone. I took the first step. The sound of my own heels striking the marble floor was shocking, a single, sharp click, echoing up into the vaulted ceiling. It sounded like a countdown. Click, click, click. Each step was a measurement, a cataloging of every promise not kept, every phone call not returned. There was no one to give me away, a small, Western concession I had argued for, telling Evan I was not property to be transferred. The truth, the one I buried, was that I wasn't sure my father would agree to do it. It seemed, in the end, he had made the decision for us both. I could feel the weight of the guests' collective stare, the confusion, the pity. Pity is a corrosive emotion. It burns worse than anger. I kept my chin up, my gaze locked forward, a technique I used when flying in low visibility. Find a fixed point and trust your instruments. My fixed point was Evan Mercer. He stood at the altar, his hands clasped, his face a mask of calm. Evan, an aircraft engineer, a man who understood mechanics and stress tolerances. He was steady in a way I had never known. As I drew closer, I saw his smile. It wasn't the broad, beaming smile of a groom. It was a small, tight, grounding smile, a pilot's smile, the kind that says, "I see the storm, and we will fly through it." When I finally reached him, his hand found mine. His skin was warm, his grip solid. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the gaping wound of the empty pews. He looked only at me. "Look at me," he murmured, his voice so low only I could hear it. "Just me." I did. I anchored myself to his clear, gray eyes. The minister began to speak. His voice was rich, rolling through the microphone, filling the spaces my family had left. He spoke of union, of 2 families joining, of fidelity and loyalty. That word, loyalty, it landed like a stone in my chest. In my home, loyalty was a one-way street. It was synonymous with obedience. My father, Leon Barry, was a high school principal, a man who ran his home like a detention hall. His word was law. "Discipline builds character," he would boom, his voice leaving no room for discussion. We were his subjects, not his children. We were issued directives, not affection. Listening was a form of surrender he never practiced. A photographer, a small woman with a large lens, moved silently in the periphery. Flash click whir. I knew what she was capturing. The bride, the groom, and the 3 rows of mocking white ribbons. They were like empty brackets in an equation, waiting for a value that would never arrive. I stood tall, my posture, drilled into me by years of uniforms, held me erect, the night shift calm, the operational stillness I relied on during a midnight rescue. Descended. I focused on the minister's words, on the ring in Evan's hand, on the breathing exercises we were taught for managing hypoxia. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. This was just another form of oxygen deprivation. The reception was held in the grand hall adjoining the church. The transition from the solemn, echoing silence to the forced gaiety was jarring. Music played. Champagne corks popped. 148 people were trying very hard to pretend that nothing was wrong. But the emptiness followed us. The seating chart, meticulously planned, now had a glaring hole. An entire section of tables near the front was starkly empty. The staff, professionals, quickly and quietly began to remove the place settings. Each clink of silverware being gathered felt like a fresh insult. Evan's family, however, was a force of nature. His mother, a warm, bustling woman with Evan's steady eyes, enveloped me in a hug that smelled of lavender and hairspray. "Courtney, child," she whispered, pulling back to hold my face in her hands. "We are so sorry, but you are our daughter now. You have us." Her words were kind, a balm, and yet they stung. You have us now. A beautiful sentiment that only highlighted what I had just so publicly lost. It was a confirmation. The void was real. I smiled. I thanked her. I drank the champagne. I moved through the room on Evan's arm, a perfect portrait of a happy bride. But my eyes kept betraying me. Every time the grand doors to the hall opened, my head would snap toward them. A reflex. My heart would give a stupid, traitorous leap. They came. They were just late. Traffic, a flat tire, a last-minute change of heart. But it was only ever a waiter with a fresh tray, or a guest returning from the restroom. Leon and Darla Barry were not coming. I remembered the text message from my brother. Tyler, a week ago, the favored one, the one for whom the rules were always bent. I had sent him a final, pleading text. "Are you coming, Ty?" It would mean the world to me. His reply came back 3 hours later, blunt and final. "Don't expect anything. Dad's dug in. Mom's with him. It is what it is." It is what it is. The passive, cowardly surrender of a family that had never learned to fight for each other, only against. We cut the cake. We had our first dance, swaying in a small circle of light. Evan holding me so tightly I could feel his heartbeat. "I love you," he said into my hair. "I'm right here." "I love you," I replied, and I meant it. But as he spun me, my gaze swept past his shoulder, over the laughing, dancing guests, and found the door. It remained stubbornly, resolutely closed. The night ended, as all nights do. The guests began to trickle out, their goodbyes laced with an unspoken sympathy that made me want to scream. We were the last to leave, gathering my veil, collecting the small personal items. In the glass-walled elevator of the hotel, it was just Evan and me. The silence was profound. The city of Port Wyndham glittered below us, indifferent. I was still clutching my bouquet, a dense, heavy ball of white roses and eucalyptus. My knuckles were white. Evan gently reached out and covered my hand with his. "You can let go now, Court." My fingers wouldn't uncurl. I was holding on to that bouquet as if it were a high-altitude oxygen mask, as if it were the stick of a helicopter in a sudden, violent downdraft. It was not a bouquet, it was a life raft. A beautiful, fragrant, and tragically late life raft, and I was already a mile from the wreckage. We didn't take a real honeymoon. 2 days, that was all we could spare, all I could mentally afford. We borrowed a friend's old convertible and drove north up the coast, the top down, the salt air whipping my hair into knots. The engine was a low, steady rumble beneath us. We stopped in small, anonymous fishing towns, places where the seagulls were louder than the people. Evan, in his worn-in jeans and a faded university hoodie, was effortlessly charming. He talked to everyone. He asked the woman at the bakery about her morning, chatted with the old man mending nets on the dock about the tide, swapped stories with the bartender at the tiny seaside dive where we ate fried clams. He collected people's stories like they were seashells, turning each one over with genuine curiosity. "That woman at the diner," he said, sliding back into the car. "Her son is applying to engineering programs. She was so proud." I watched him, this man who was so open, so fundamentally connected to the world, and I felt a pang of something like envy. He believed in the inherent goodness of connection. I saw connection as a potential liability, a line that could be cut, a frequency that could be jammed. I wore my old CRA flight jacket. The heavy nylon was a comfort, a second skin. In the inside breast pocket, my fingers kept finding the sharp corner of the invitation. Not my invitation, but the one I had mailed to my parents' house 2 months ago. Evan had seen me slip it into my jacket as we left the hotel. He hadn't asked why. He knew. It was thick cardstock, embossed, expensive. The calligrapher had written, "The Barry family," in sweeping, elegant script. I'd run my thumb over the raised ink until it was smooth. I kept it. I kept it because some wounds need to be remembered. You don't ignore a fracture when you're setting a bone. You identify the break, you clean it, and you set it. This invitation was my diagnostic. It was the proof that the break was not in my head. It was the reminder I needed to keep myself honest, to stop myself from patching over the void with excuses for them. They were busy. They were stressed. They didn't understand. No, they had received this. They had held it. And they had made a choice. We drove back to Port Wyndham on a gray, overcast Tuesday. The drive, which had been bright and cleansing on the way out, felt oppressive on the return. The city's skyline, usually a welcome sight, looked jagged and cold. Our apartment, which we had left in a flurry of pre-wedding chaos, was perfectly still. The silence that greeted us was different from the peace of the coast. This was an empty, expectant silence. The air was stale. A few stray pieces of wrapping paper from wedding gifts we'd opened early were still on the floor, looking pathetic. Evan started unpacking, his movements efficient, filling the silence with the domestic sounds of zippers and rustling bags. I went to the answering machine. The little red light was blinking. 0. "Welcome home, Mr. Mercer," I said, trying for levity. "Welcome home, Captain Barry," he replied, catching me from behind and wrapping his arms around my waist. He kissed the side of my neck. "You're off rotation for 2 more days. We could unpack." I leaned back into him, letting his warmth soak in. "I think I'm going to check the duty roster." "Courtney," his voice was gentle, a caution. "I just want to see who's flying. Make sure the new guy didn't log any hours on my bird." He sighed, but he let me go. "Don't fall in." "I won't," I lied. I fell in. I dove. The Coastal Response Authority was my sanctuary. It was the one place where the rules made sense, where cause and effect were absolute, where my father's brand of logic-defying emotional tyranny had no jurisdiction. I went in the next day, a full day before my leave was officially over, claiming I needed to sign off on some maintenance logs. My flight lead, Briggs, saw right through it. He just grunted, handed me a tablet, and said, "Don't break anything, Barry, and congratulations. Mercer's a good man. Doesn't know what he's gotten into." "Thanks, sir." I went straight to the simulators. I needed to fly. I programmed a night storm simulation. Force 10 gales, 0 visibility, a vessel in distress with a compromised hull. the full nightmare scenario. I strapped into the sim chair, the familiar 5-point harness clicking into place, a comforting pressure on my chest and lap. The hydraulics hissed to life, the screens lit up, plunging me into a computer-generated world of shrieking wind and driving rain. This, I understood. For 3 hours, I was not Courtney Barry, the abandoned bride. I was callsign Rescue 09, and I was God. I managed fuel consumption against rotor torque. I coordinated with the flight mechanic and the rescue swimmer, their voices crisp and calm in my headset. 09. Target is 2 miles. Bearing 030. I'm reading 20-foot seas and worsening. Copy. Ops. We're on approach. Gimme the light. My hands moved over the controls, my feet on the anti-torque pedals. It was a violent, precise ballet. I didn't think. I processed. I reacted. I ran my checklists, my voice a low, steady monotone that cut through the simulated chaos. Pre-hoist checklist, in-flight emergency checklist, post-hoist checklist. These were my prayers, a litany of procedure. Attitude, check. Power, check. Trim, check. If you followed the checklist, you went home. If you followed the checklist, you saved the life. There was no ambiguity. There was no room for it is what it is. When the simulation ended, 4 virtual survivors safely on deck, I sat in the sudden silence, my flight suit damp with sweat, my pulse thrumming. I felt clean. I felt empty. I felt sane. That night, Evan was fast asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. The clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. My shift pattern was so ingrained that normal sleep hours felt alien. I slipped out of bed, the wooden floor cold under my feet, and sat on the couch, my phone in my hand. I scrolled, not through social media, not through the wedding photos Evan had already started to receive from friends. I scrolled back, years. I stopped on a photo from my graduation at the flight academy. Me, younger, thinner, my face sharp with a kind of desperate pride. I was in my dress uniform, my new wings pinned so tightly to my chest they might have been holding my ribs together. My father stood next to me, Leon Barry, tall, barrel-chested, his principal suit immaculate. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His hand was on my shoulder, but it wasn't a hug, it was a restraint. I remembered what he said to me that day, right after the photo was taken. I'd just been commended for finishing top of my class in aerodynamics. I was vibrating with achievement. "Well," he'd said, his voice a low rumble. "You did it. Just don't get cocky. Pride is a short flight to a hard landing." Not, "I'm proud of you," not, "well done," a warning, a correction, as if my success were a behavioral issue he needed to manage. His entire philosophy, the gospel he preached at the dinner table and from the stage of his high school auditorium, was discipline builds character, but his definition of discipline was just a synonym for control. It was about breaking you down, not building you up. It was about obedience, absolute and unquestioning. I scrolled further. Me, in my full CRA flight suit, standing in front of my helicopter after my first solo rescue. I was 28. I had just been promoted to lead pilot, the youngest in the station's history. I'd sent him the photo. He never responded. No text, no call, not a word. When I'd finally gotten him on the phone a week later, I'd asked, "Did you get the picture?" "I got it," he said. There was a shuffling of papers. He was at his desk. He was always at his desk. "Tyler's having some trouble with his car insurance. You know, these premiums are criminal." And he had just moved on. My promotion, my life's work, was less interesting to him than his son's administrative problems. I stared at the dark screen of my phone. The empty pews. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a last-minute emergency. It was a calculated lesson. It was the final, logical expression of his entire belief system. My wedding, my happiness with a man he hadn't chosen, was an act of insubordination. It was pride, and pride, he'd taught me, must be punished. He was punishing me with silence, the ultimate withdrawal of approval. the ultimate act of control. He was showing me that my greatest joy was meaningless without his validation. He was trying to prove that he still held the power to destroy me, simply by not showing up. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my movements stiff. I poured a glass of water, my hand shaking slightly. I pulled my phone back out, my thumb hovering over his name, Leon Barry. I typed out a message. The wedding was fine. I stared at the words. Too provocative? Too pleading? I deleted it. I typed another. I'm back from the honeymoon. Deleted. Finally, I just called. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, it clicked to his voice. Not his real voice, but the recorded one. You have reached Leon Barry. I am unable to come to the phone. Leave a message, and I will return your call at my earliest convenience. His convenience. I hung up without leaving a message. I went back to work the next day. The crew had left a card on my locker. It was a goofy, oversized thing with a cartoon helicopter on the front. Inside, in a dozen different scrawls, were their congratulations. Marta, my flight mechanic, had written, "Heard you walk the aisle alone. You stood taller than the whole damn formation. Glad you're back. Captain?" I felt a hot sting behind my eyes and blinked it away, shoving the card into my locker. That night, Evan cooked. He made pasta, the kind that takes hours, and opened a good bottle of wine. We ate at our small dining table, the wedding gifts still piled in the corner of the room. "Marta said you were in the sim yesterday," he said, not looking at me. "Just knocking the rust off." "You don't have rust. Courtney." He put his fork down and finally met my gaze. "You don't have to fly away from this. You can just be in it, with me." "I am," I insisted, my voice tight. "I'm here." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You're here, but you keep checking the door. You've been checking it since we got home, like you're still expecting someone to walk through it." I pulled my hand back, needing the space. "It's just a habit." "Is it?" he asked, his voice full of a patience I knew I didn't deserve. "Courtney, you're my wife. You're my family. You will never, ever walk alone again. You don't have to wait for them." "I'm not waiting for them," I said, my voice sharp. But even as I said it, my eyes flickered to the hallway, to the front door, as if I could will them to appear, to apologize, to finally see me. The habit was a hard one to break. It was 5:14 in the morning, still dark. The air in the bedroom was cold and still. The only sound was Evan's breathing. Then, a vibration. My phone, on the nightstand, buzzed against the wood. A short, angry sound. It was not my alarm. I am a light sleeper. In my line of work, you have to be. You have to go from a dead sleep to full operational awareness in the 30 seconds it takes to get your boots on. I reached for the phone, a text message. The screen was painfully bright in the darkness. The name on the screen was Leon Barry. My heart didn't leap. It didn't sink. It just stopped. It went into a holding pattern. I had not seen his name on my screen in 3 months, not since the final, screaming argument about the wedding invitations. He had gone from shouting to silence, a silence that culminated in 18 empty seats. Now, a week after I walked down the aisle alone, he was texting me at 5:14 in the morning. I slid the notification open. The message was short. It was not an apology. It was not an explanation. It was an order. "Transfer $9,200 for Tyler's wedding. You're the sensible one." I read the words. I read them again. The light from the screen cast a blue, sterile glow on my face. $9,200. He'd even written it out. "You're the sensible one." That was the key, the old, familiar key he used to try and turn my lock. Courtney is the sensible one. Courtney is the responsible one. Courtney will handle it. Courtney will clean up the mess. Courtney will pay the bill. He hadn't spoken to me in months. He had actively, publicly, and humiliatingly abandoned me on the most important day of my life. And his first communication since was not, "I am sorry." It was not, "Are you okay?" It was an invoice. The audacity of it was so pure, so potent. It was almost beautiful. It was the most Leon Barry thing he had ever done. Court? Evan's voice was thick with sleep. He rolled over, blinking. What is it? Is it a call? No, I said. My voice was flat, empty. It's a text. From my father. Evan sat up immediately, the protective instinct kicking in. What, is he okay? What's wrong? I turned the phone so he could see the screen. He squinted. Then his eyes went wide. He took the phone from my hand. He read the message aloud, his voice full of a disbelief I couldn't be bothered to feel. Transfer $9,200. He looked at me, his face a mask of confusion, then dawning rage. Is he kidding? Is this a joke? No, I said, taking the phone back. I swung my legs out of bed. The floor was cold. He's not kidding. He's giving an order. He's used to giving orders. He expects them to be followed. After what he did? Evan's voice was rising. He didn't come to our wedding. Courtney, he left you to walk down that aisle alone, and now he wants… What, alone? Not alone, I said. A transfer. He's billing me. He's billing me for the privilege of being his sensible daughter. Tyler is getting married, and I am expected to pay for it. That's… Evan searched for a word and came up empty. He just shook his head. You're not going to reply to that. You're not… I looked at the phone in my hand. No, I'm not going to reply. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room. The first gray light of dawn was beginning to seep through the blinds. Port Wyndham was waking up. I sat on the couch. I opened my banking app. I am a pilot. I am a woman of procedure. I am a woman of precision. An action requires a reaction. A command requires a response. He had given me a command. I would give him a response. I tapped the screen. Transfer funds. I selected the recipient, Leon Barry. His name was still in my contacts, a digital relic. I entered the amount. $1. I paused. I should have entered 1 cent, but $1 had more weight. It was a clear, intentional, decimal-pointed statement. Then I went to the memo line. The app gave me 150 characters. I thought about all the things I could write, all the rage, the years of pain, the humiliation of those empty pews. I could have written a novel. Instead, my thumbs moved quickly. Best wishes. I looked at the screen. Transfer $1 to Leon Barry. Memo. Best wishes. I pressed confirm. The app screen changed. Your transfer is complete. I felt a sudden, sharp, cold clarity. It was the same feeling I got when I broke through a low-cloud ceiling into clean, bright sunlight. I went back to his contact information. I scrolled to the bottom. Block this caller. I pressed it. Are you sure? Oh, I was sure. I blocked his number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked my brother's number. I was sealing the hatches. I was depressurizing the cabin. I put the phone down on the coffee table. Then I picked it back up, walked into the kitchen, and locked it in the junk drawer. The one full of old batteries and soy sauce packets. It felt like disarming a bomb. I was putting the alarm in a box where I couldn't hear it. Evan was standing in the doorway, watching me. He had a look on his face I couldn't quite read. Awe, maybe. A little bit of fear. I'm changing the locks, I said. What? The locks. On the apartment. I'm calling a locksmith today. He still has a key from years ago. I'm changing the locks. Good, Evan said, his voice firm. Good. That's a good idea. He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders. Are you okay? I'm operational, I said. It was the only answer I had. I did not stay operational for long. The silence lasted until noon. I made coffee. I called the locksmith. I checked my duty roster for the next week. I acted normal. But the silence was a living thing. The silence from my phone in the drawer. It was an absence of data. And I am a person who requires data. I don't fly blind. I need to know what the weather is doing. I need to know where the storm front is. He had sent a text. I had responded. He would, in turn, respond to my response. I needed to see it. I needed to know the next move on the board. At 12:03, I went to the drawer. I took out the phone. I unlocked it. I went back to his contact. I pressed unblock this caller. It was like opening a fire hydrant. The messages, pent up in the digital ether, flooded in, a torrent of them, all in angry, blue-bubbled succession. The first one was just a question mark. The second, is this a joke? The third, send the money, Courtney. The fourth, the one that must have arrived just moments ago. That was childish. The wedding is next month. Do not embarrass this family. Childish. My breath caught in my throat. Of all the words, of all the weapons in his arsenal, that was his favorite. It was the one he used to disarm me, to diminish me, to reduce me from a competent adult to a petulant toddler. My achievements? Don't be childish. Courtney, boasting is unattractive. My fears? Childish. Everyone is scared. Discipline is the answer. My pain, my anger, my joy, all childish, all irrelevant. And now, my $1 transfer, that small, perfect act of defiance, was childish. It was not the insult that struck me. It was the thudding, cold, clinical indifference. He had publicly excommunicated me from the family, and now he was texting me orders to protect that same family's reputation. My role was not to be a daughter. My role was not to be a bride. My role was to be the sensible checkbook, and my refusal was childish. He was not angry. He was not hurt. He was inconvenienced. I had become an administrative problem. My vision went sharp at the edges. I could feel the blood pulsing in my temples. I turned the phone off. The screen went black, a perfect, silent, reflective black. I saw my own face in it. My eyes were cold. I did not turn it on for the rest of the day. That evening, Evan found me in our small home office. I was sitting at the desk. I was not crying. I was not raging. I had a soft cloth and a small tub of brass polish. Lined up on my desk were my medals. My CRA Commendation Medal for the rescue of a family of 4 from a sinking yacht. My Aerial Achievement Medal for logging over 2,000 hours of accident-free flight in hazardous conditions. A small unit citation ribbon. They were not much, just small pieces of metal and colored ribbon, but they were real. They were earned. They were objective. I was polishing the commendation medal, rubbing the tarnish away, my movements small and circular. Evan stood in the doorway, just watching. It's a ritual, I said, not looking up. They look better in the display case when they're clean. You don't have to prove anything to him. Court, Evan said, his voice so gentle it almost broke me. You don't have to line up your accomplishments to prove you're not childish. I stopped rubbing. I looked at the medal in my hand. The light caught the raised edges of the helicopter engraving. I'm not proving it to him, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was hard as a diamond. He's irrelevant. He's a non-factor. I looked up at my husband. I'm proving it to myself. I'm proving to myself that all those years of his discipline, of swallowing my voice, of being the sensible one, they meant something. He thought he was building an obedient soldier, but he made a mistake. He built a pilot, I said. He built me, and all that training, all that pain. It wasn't for him. It was my escape. These medals aren't for him. They're my flight logs. They're the proof that I got out. I went back to polishing. The scent of the chemical polish sharp in the air. And he is never, ever getting in my cockpit again. Blocking him was a declaration of war. I just hadn't realized he would change the battlefield. The first 3 days were quiet, a false, pressurized silence, like the air before a storm breaks. I had changed the locks. I had blocked the numbers. I thought, secured my perimeter. I was wrong. My perimeter was my mind. He had laid traps in there for 34 years. Marta Ruiz, my lead flight mechanic, flagged me down in the hangar as I was signing off a pre-flight checklist. Marta was a woman who spoke in clipped, efficient sentences and saw through everyone's bullshit. Got a minute, Captain? She asked, wiping grease from her hands onto a rag. What's up, Marta? I was at the Bilgewater, she said, naming the Greasy Spoon coffee shop down by the harbor, the one all the dock workers and CRA crews used. Grabbing my coffee this morning, saw a guy. Okay, I said, waiting for the punchline. Big guy. Looks like he chews on nails. Wears a suit that's too tight. He was asking questions about you. My blood went cold. Not a hot, angry flush, but an icy, systemic shock, like I'd been dropped in the mid-Atlantic. What kind of questions? Asked the barista if she knew where the CRA pilots hung out. Said his daughter was a pilot. Wanted to surprise her. Courtney Barry. Marta's eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed on my face. He didn't look like a guy interested in a happy surprise. Court, he looked like a truant officer. I told the barista to keep her mouth shut. He left, but he was taking notes. Leon, he was at the harbor. He was reconnoitering my life, trying to find my professional base of operations. He had lost digital access to me, so now he was resorting to analog, ground-level intelligence gathering. He was mapping my territory. Thanks, Marta, I said, my voice tight. I appreciate the heads up. We're not in a good place. Yeah, I got that, she said. He looked like my old man right before he threw a pot roast at the wall. You watch your six. Captain. I nodded, but I was already gone. My mind was spinning, not in the present, but 15 years in the past. I was 16 years old. I had a 99 average in honors physics. I had a date for the prom. I had a dress, a color I'd actually chosen myself, a deep, midnight blue. I was, for one fleeting moment, happy. Then, report cards came out. My physics grade had dropped. Not to a B, not to a C. It had dropped 1 point. From a 99 to a 98. I had miscalculated a single vector equation on the final. Leon had seen the report card before I did. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I got home. The report card was on the table, next to his coffee mug. 1 point, he said, not looking at me. He was grading papers, his red pen slashing. It's still a 98, Dad. It's the highest grade in the class. Discipline, he said, the word a hammer, is not about being the highest. It's about being perfect. It's about maintaining the standard. You got sloppy, you got complacent. It was 1 point. You're not going to the prom. It was that simple. No discussion, no appeal. What, Dad? The dress is paid for. My date? Call him. Cancel it. You will spend that weekend in your room, studying. You will find that point you lost. You will learn that control is the only thing that matters. A lack of control, even for a second, even by 1 point, is failure. I hadn't just lost a dance. I had been taught, again, his core curriculum. Control was his religion. My independence was heresy. My happiness was a distraction from the doctrine. And now, here I was, 34 years old, and he was at the harbor, trying to find my new report card. He was hunting for the single point of leverage he could use to regain control. That night, the rain started, a cold, driving Port Wyndham storm that rattled the new locks on our windows. Evan found me staring out into the darkness, the city lights blurred and fractured by the water on the glass. You're not here, he said, coming up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He's here, I said. He's in the city. He's asking questions. Evan, he's advancing. So you advance back? I don't know how to do anything else. He pushes. I push back. He cuts me. I cut him. It's the only language we speak. It's the one he taught me. Evan rested his chin on my shoulder. His warmth was a stark contrast to the cold I felt inside. Then you have to retrain yourself, he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the storm. He trained you to be a soldier in his army. He taught you to anticipate his orders, even if you were anticipating them just to defy them. You're still on his frequency. Court, you're not his soldier anymore. You're not a soldier at all. You're a pilot. You're my wife. You don't have to answer his call to arms. Retrain yourself. It was such a simple concept. It was the hardest thing he could have asked. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I gave up. I dressed in my fatigues, not a flight suit, just the simple, comforting uniform of the day, and I drove. I drove to the CRA base. The guards at the gate, used to my nocturnal hours, just waved me through. I didn't go to the simulators. I didn't go to the hangar. I went to the base chapel. It wasn't really a chapel, just a non-denominational quiet room, a small, circular room with a high ceiling, soft lighting, and rows of simple wooden benches. It was always empty. I sat on a bench in the back row, in the dark. I didn't pray. I just sat. I let the operational silence of the building seep into me. The night shift is a hard one for the soul, isn't it, Captain? I didn't jump. The voice was as quiet as the room. Father Michael, the agency chaplain, was standing in the doorway. He was a retired Navy man, with kind eyes and a face like a worn-out leather glove. "It's not the shift, Father," I said. He nodded, walking in slowly, sitting 2 rows ahead of me, not looking at me. "It's rarely the shift." He was quiet for a full minute. "We give out a lot of medals in our line of work, for valor, for achievement, for saving lives." I said nothing. My polished medals were in their case at home. "But some wars, Captain," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Some wars, the ones we fight in here." He tapped his own temple. "They don't have any medals. They don't have parades. Victory isn't a flag on a hill. Victory is just surviving. Victory is just getting up in the morning and choosing to be better than the man who taught you to be cruel." He stood up, just as slowly. "The light is always on. Courtney, even at 3 a.m. He left me there, and for the first time, I felt something other than anger or defiance. I felt a profound, bottomless exhaustion, the exhaustion of a 34-year war. The letter arrived the next day. Evan found it. It wasn't mailed. It was wedged in the frame of our apartment door, just above the new, high-security deadbolt. A crisp, white envelope, my name, Courtney, was written on the front in my father's unmistakable, severe block print. He had bypassed the locked lobby. He had come to my floor. He had stood right here. He was marking his territory. Evan just held it out to me, his face grim. I took it. I opened it. It was a single sheet of his thick, expensive, personal stationery, the kind he used for writing disciplinary notices. It was short. "You forgot your roots. You trade your family for a piece of tin and a new name. Those medals will keep you lonely. Your brother's wedding will proceed, with or without your support. You have made your choice." It was not signed. It didn't need to be. I read it twice. He was wrong. My new name was my name. My medals were my proof. And I was not lonely. I was besieged. Evan was watching me, his hands clenched, expecting an explosion, expecting me to rage, to cry, to tear the paper to shreds. I didn't. I just folded it, neatly, in thirds. I walked into the kitchen and set it on the counter, next to a stack of grocery store flyers. I gave it no ceremony. I gave it no power. It was just another piece of junk mail. "That's it?" Evan asked, incredulous. "You're not going to burn it?" "Burning it is a ceremony," I said, opening the refrigerator. "It gives it meaning. It's just paper. He's just a man. You want coffee?" Evan looked at me, a slow smile spreading. Yeah, I do." He came over and put his arms around me. "I'm proud of you. Court." "It's not over," I said, my voice muffled in his shirt. "He's still advancing." "I know," he said, holding me tighter. "But you're not. You're holding the line." He kissed the top of my head. "Distance only works when both sides stop advancing. He's still coming, so we just have to be better at standing still." The call came 2 days later. I was in the middle of a shift briefing, going over weather patterns for a potential squall line moving down the coast. My personal phone, which was supposed to be on silent, rang, an unknown number. I tapped decline. It rang again, immediately. The protocol for emergency contact. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway. Barry, I answered, all business. Is this Captain Courtney Barry? The voice was male, professional, and had the unmistakable flat tone of law enforcement. This is she. Who am I speaking with? Ma'am, this is Officer Grant, Port Wyndham Police Department. I'm calling from outside your apartment, 1450 Harbor View, Unit 4B. My spine turned to a steel rod. Is my husband okay? Is Evan there? Your husband is not on scene, ma'am, but we are here with a Mr. Leon Barry. Your father? I closed my eyes. He's advancing. Yes, he's my father. What is the problem? Officer? Well, ma'am, he's filed a report. He's here to... Well, he's making allegations of an unauthorized withdrawal from what he calls a family fund. A family fund. The sheer, magnificent, toxic creativity of the man. A family fund, I repeated. My voice was calm, detached. I was a pilot assessing a critical engine failure. I was not a daughter. Yes, ma'am. He's claiming you stole money from him. He's quite agitated. He's demanding I don't know, arrest you? Honestly, ma'am, this feels domestic, but he's insistent on filing a report. I understand. Officer, I said. My mind was crystal clear. I thought of the new Ring camera Evan had installed, the one that covered our entire front door, the one that was, at this very moment, recording my father and 2 police officers. I'm at work. I will be there in 20 minutes. Do not let him into my apartment. We won't, ma'am. We'll wait for you in the lobby. Thank you, officer. I hung up. I walked to my locker, my movements deliberate. I was not panicking. I was preparing. I opened my flight bag. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the printout from my bank. Transfer to Leon Barry. Amount, $1,000. Memo. Best wishes. I opened my wallet. I pulled out the crisp, folded receipt from the locksmith, dated 3 days ago. Service, full rekey, high-security deadbolt installation. Amount, $350. I grabbed my keys. I walked out of the briefing room. Marta saw me. Squall's getting closer. Captain. It's already here, Marta, I said, walking past her. Take over the brief. I have a domestic situation to handle. I didn't run. I walked, my heels striking the concrete floor of the hangar. Click, click, click. It was the same sound from the church aisle, but this time I wasn't walking away from a void. I was walking toward a boundary, and I was going to hold it. The drive from the base was 20 minutes. I did it in 15. I broke 4 traffic laws, but I did it with the precise, calculated risk of a pilot who knows her machine and her route. My machine was a battered old sedan, and my route was a warpath. I didn't park in my own garage. I parked on the street, 2 blocks away, and walked, my flight bag slung over one shoulder. I came in through the main lobby entrance, not the residence elevator. I needed to see the terrain as they saw it. They were standing near the mailboxes, 2 Port Wyndham police officers, looking bored and uncomfortable, and my father? And my father was performing. The lobby of our building is all cool, modern glass and brushed steel. It's designed for quiet, professional anonymity. Leon Barry, in his too-tight suit, his face a blotchy, furious red, was a wound in the sterile environment. He was pacing, his hands gesturing wildly, his voice, his Principal Barry voice, ricocheting off the marble. He was talking at the officers, who were clearly just trying to contain him. And it is a flagrant disregard for the family structure, he boomed. A clear case of fiduciary irresponsibility. I am her father. I demand. Above his head, in the corner of the doorframe, I saw the small, glowing blue ring of Evan's new doorbell camera. It was on. It was recording every word, every gesture. The thought gave me a cold, savage satisfaction. Smile, Dad. You're on camera. I stopped a good 10 feet from them. I set my bag down on the floor with a soft, heavy thud. The sound cut through his tirade. All three of them turned. The two officers looked relieved. They saw my uniform. They saw the captain's bars on my collar, the official CRA patch on my shoulder. I was not some hysterical, unknown variable. I was a professional. I was one of them, in a way. My father saw me, and his face, impossibly, got darker. His eyes narrowed. This was not how he had planned this. He had planned to have me dragged out, confused, in my pajamas, not arriving in a uniform that held more authority than his. "Ma'am? Captain Barry?" The older officer, Grant, stepped forward, his hand moving toward his notepad. He was grateful to have someone sane to talk to. "I'm Courtney Barry," I said. My voice, I noted with clinical detachment, was perfect. It was my rescue coordinator voice. Low, calm, steady, with an ironclad subaudible tone of command. It was the voice I used when I was talking a panicked, drowning man into a rescue sling from 20 feet up in a hurricane. It was a voice that did not invite negotiation. "What is the situation, officer?" "Well, ma'am," he began, looking embarrassed. "Your father, Mr. Barry, he filed a report alleging, well, theft. He claims you stole $9,200 from a family fund." I held the officer's gaze. I did not look at my father. He was a distraction. He was a high-wind variable. You don't look at the wind, you look at your instruments. "I see," I said. I unzipped a side pocket on my flight bag. I reached in. I pulled out 2 folded pieces of paper. "First," I said, handing one to the officer, "there is no family fund. There has never been a family fund. That is a fiction. What did happen is that my father, after months of silence and after refusing to attend my wedding, sent me an unauthorized demand for money." I held up the second piece of paper. It was the bank statement. I didn't give it to him. I just held it, my thumb on the relevant line. "My response," I said, my voice cutting through the lobby's air conditioning hum, "was a transfer for the amount of $1. The memo line, as you can see, reads, 'Best wishes.'" I heard the other officer, the younger one, make a sound. It was a cough, but it was a cough that was desperately trying not to be a laugh. He turned his head away, suddenly fascinated by the elevator call buttons. Officer Grant kept his composure, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. He cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, turning to my father, "Mr. Barry, as you can see, this is, well, it appears to be a misunderstanding. This is not a police matter." The word misunderstanding was a lit match on a gas leak. "Misunderstanding?" Leon roared. The sound was shocking, physically painful in the enclosed space. He took a step toward me, his finger jabbing. That principal's finger, the one that had sentenced me to 1,000 small detentions. You are an ungrateful, disloyal." He was shouting at me, but his words were for the police. He was trying to reestablish his authority, to bully them back onto his side. "She owes this family. She owes her brother. She has a duty. I am the head of this family, and she has stolen." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just let him burn himself out. When he finally paused, gasping for breath, his face slick with sweat, I looked at him. I really looked at him, for the first time, not as my father, not as a god or a tyrant, just as a man, a red-faced, desperate, screaming man, losing control in a public lobby. "I don't owe silence," I said. My voice was a razor. It was so quiet, so different from his screaming, that it sucked all the sound from the room. His mouth snapped shut. "I don't owe my brother," I continued, my voice even. "And I don't owe you. Not after what you did. You are not the head of my family. You are not the head of this household." Courtney. The elevator doors had opened. I hadn't even heard the ding. Evan was there. He wasn't in his pajamas. He was dressed, jeans, boots, his heavy engineer's jacket. He must have been watching the camera feed from the moment it triggered. He was ready for this. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at the police. He came and stood next to me. He just stood there, He didn't touch me. He didn't hold my hand. He just occupied the space at my side. A solid, immovable object. My wingman. His presence was a full stop. It was the end of the conversation. He looked at Leon. His voice was as calm as mine, but with a different weight, a heavy, dangerous patience. "You should leave, Leon," he said. My father looked from Evan to me. He saw the two of us, standing side by side, the pilot and the engineer, a closed system, a crew, and he was outside. "Now," Evan added, his voice dropping an octave. This was Officer Grant's cue. He had his out. He stepped between us and my father, a professional, practiced move. "Sir," Grant said, his voice all business now, "you need to leave the premises. You are not welcome here. If you do not leave, your daughter and son-in-law can have you charged with trespassing. This is not a criminal matter, but it's about to become one if you don't cooperate." The younger officer moved to the lobby door, holding it open. Humiliation. It was an acid bath. I could see it eating him alive. He was being dismissed. By me. By my husband. And now, by the very police officers he had summoned to be his army. He was being escorted. He was a principal being marched out of his own school. He let them walk him to the door. But he wasn't finished. He couldn't be. He had to have the last word. His entire identity was built on having the last word. He stopped at the threshold. He turned. His eyes were burning with a hatred that was so pure. It was almost clean. He looked past me, at my uniform, at the bars on my collar. "That's it, isn't it?" he spat, his voice a low, vicious snarl. "Your rank, your little costume, that's what makes you right?" He thought it was an insult. He thought it was the final, perfect barb. I almost smiled. "No," I said. I let the silence hang in the air for a beat. "It doesn't make me right." I held his gaze. "It lets me keep my peace." His face crumpled. That was the blow. Not the anger, not the defiance, the peace, the fact that I could have it, and he couldn't touch it. Officer Grant put a hand on his arm, and this time, Leon went. He stumbled out into the daylight. We watched through the glass as they spoke to him, pointed to his car, and waited. They waited until he got in his car and drove away. The lobby doors hissed shut. The air conditioning kicked back on. The silence was deafening. Evan's hand found mine. His palm was steady and warm. "You okay, Captain?" he murmured. "I am," I said, but I wasn't. I looked down. My right hand, the one that had held the bank statement, was trembling. Not a shake, a high frequency, uncontrollable vibration. My body was betraying me. "Court?" Evan's voice was sharp with concern. "It's fine," I said, clenching my fist, trying to make it stop. "It's just adrenaline." It wasn't fear. I was not afraid of him anymore. I was terrified of what had just happened. That sound, that high, sharp twang I had felt in my chest. It was the sound of a cable, a thick steel mooring line that had held me fast to his dock for 34 years. A line I had been pulling against, fighting, and yet always been attached to. And it had just snapped. My hand wasn't shaking from fear. It was shaking from the recoil, from the sudden, terrifying, absolute freedom. "Let's go upstairs," Evan said, pulling me gently toward the elevator. "I need to check the footage." Later that night, our neighbor, Mrs. Elias from 6A, the one who was a litigator, knocked on our door. She'd heard the commotion through the residence grapevine. We invited her in. We gave her a glass of wine, and we showed her the video. She watched the entire thing in silence, her face impassive. The blue-lit, wide-angle footage of my father's meltdown, my arrival, the words. When it was over, she just took a sip of her wine. "Save that file," she said, her voice crisp. "Save it to an external drive, and save it to the cloud. Give me a copy." She looked at me. "He did this at your home. The next place he will go is your work. This is a classic escalation pattern. The moment he does, the second you hear he's been on base, or called your superior, or even just parked across the street. You call me, Isad. She finished her wine and stood up. Do not warn him. Do not engage. You call me, she said. We can have an emergency restraining order filed and served in less than an hour. That video, Courtney, that's not just a memory. That's evidence. Use it. The victory in the lobby was a cold, sharp, metallic thing. It lasted about 12 hours. Mrs. Elias's warning proved prophetic. The attack, when it came, wasn't a frontal assault. It was an infiltration, a quiet procedural attempt to poison the well. I was in the middle of a post-flight debrief, logging engine hours, when Commander Briggs' voice crackled over the intercom. Barry, my office, now. No please, no captain, just the gravelly, annoyed tone of a man who was having his day interrupted. I walked the short distance, the scent of jet fuel and sea salt clinging to my flight suit. Briggs's office was immaculate, the awards on his wall perfectly level, his desk clear except for a single, stark white envelope. He didn't tell me to sit. He just slid the envelope across the polished desk. Received at 0800, he said, his voice flat. Anonymous. I picked it up. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the CRA Oversight Committee. My stomach tightened. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was a letter, typed, not handwritten. The language was formal, stilted, full of cheap legalisms. Grave concerns regarding the ethical conduct of Captain Courtney Barry. A pattern of financial abuse directed at her family. Exploitation of her younger brother for personal gain. It was Leon's voice, dressed up in a rented tuxedo. I put the letter down on the desk. My hands were perfectly steady. It's a lie, sir, I said. Briggs leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted. Of course it is. Barry, I've known you for 6 years. You're the most rigidly moral pilot I've got. You once filed a report on yourself for taking a free donut from the canteen. It was an undeclared gift, sir, I said automatically. My point, he sighed. Your file is spotless. Your financials, which we review every year for your clearance, are boring. You are, in the legal sense, clean, which is why this, he tapped the letter, is not a problem. It's just a headache. A procedural requirement. A requirement for what? A requirement for me to officially notify you that we have received an anonymous complaint, which I am required to place in a temporary file. I am also required to tell you that unless this pattern continues, or any actual evidence is presented, which it won't be, this letter gets deep-sixed and shredded in 60 days. It is, for all intents and purposes, bullshit. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. This is me, officially, telling you, now this is me, as your CO, asking, is this going to be a problem? Is this family crap, going to find its way back to my base? No, sir, I said. It's an extension of a domestic issue. It's been contained. Good, he grunted, because I need your head in the air. Not, wherever this garbage came from, get out of my office. Yes, sir. I walked out, contained. It was a lie. It was the biggest lie I'd told all week. I had contained nothing. I had just repelled the first boarding party. The second wave of the attack was already underway. When I got to the locker room to change, I checked my phone. I didn't have much social media. Flying at my level didn't leave much time for it, but I had an account. I checked it. I'm not sure why. A bad feeling. My cousin Sarah, my mother's sister's daughter, had unfriended me. It was so small, so petty. It was a single digital click, but it was a clear signal. The family, the extended network, had received their marching orders. The narrative had been set. I scrolled for another minute. My aunt, the one who always smelled of too sweet perfume and judgment, had posted a public quote. A tree that forgets its roots will wither and die in the first storm. Someone had commented underneath, thinking of you and Leon, some children are just ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word again. The digital shrapnel was flying. But the real coordinated attack was on my father's own page. He, of course, had posted nothing. He was too smart for that. He just left a vacuum, and his sycophants rushed to fill it. He was a beloved principal, a pillar of the community. He was the victim. A parent of a former student had written on his timeline, "Mr. Barry, I just want to send our love. We are so sorry to hear what your family is going through. You raised your children to be leaders. It's a tragedy when one of them uses that strength to hurt the ones who love them." Another, "I remember that girl, always had her head in the clouds. Stubborn. I guess some people fly too high and forget the ground they came from." They were painting me as a cold, ambitious, money-hungry monster who had turned her back on the loving, salt-of-the-earth family that had given me everything. He hadn't just called the cops. He had called in his entire social cavalry. I felt sick. I was in the base canteen, grabbing a coffee I didn't want, when one of the new dispatch interns, a kid barely 20, approached me. He looked nervous. "Captain Barry? What is it, trainee?" I hope this isn't weird, but are you okay? I saw some stuff on Facebook. My mom is friends with, anyway, she said—" I put my coffee cup down. My voice was ice. "Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Kid, stick to the approach plates. They're more accurate, and they'll keep you alive longer." He recoiled, as if I'd slapped him. "Yes, Captain. Sorry, Captain." He hurried away. I watched him go, and I hated what I was becoming. I hated this cold, hard, brittle shell that was forming. I went home. Evan was waiting. He had that look on his face, his engineer look, the one where he was calculating stress loads and seeing structural failures. "He's opened a second front," I said, dropping my flight bag. "I saw," Evan said. He was sitting at our small desk, the laptop open. "He's methodical. I'll give him that. He's launching a public relations campaign and a professional attack simultaneously. He's trying to isolate you." "It's working," I whispered. "No," Evan said, his voice sharp. "It's not." He stood up. "It's just making him sloppy. He's making noise, and it's drawing attention. But we're not going to be sloppy. We're going to be silent, and we're going to be smart." He was in tactical mode. "First, I've already locked down all your profiles. Full privacy, maximum security. He wants to fight with whispers. We'll give him silence. Second, I'm having our mail forwarded to a post office box. Effective tomorrow. No more letters wedged in the door. He wants to contact you. He has to go through the federal mail system, which, by the way, makes anything he sends evidence." He came over to me. "And third, this is the one you're not going to like." "What?" "I'm activating a full-spectrum credit monitoring service, all 3 bureaus, and we're going to pull your full reports, tonight." I stared at him. "Why? My credit is fine. Briggs said it was boring." "Briggs has the summary," Evan said. "He doesn't have the line item detail. Courtney, your father just lied to the police. He just lied to your commanding officer. He is accusing you of financial abuse. This is the battlefield he has chosen. We are going to find out, right now, if he's been fighting on it longer than we have." It took an hour. The website was slow. The security questions were invasive. But finally, we were in. We scrolled through the reports. TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, boring. Just like Briggs said, my mortgage, my car loan, my one, single, paid-off every month credit card. "See?" I said, relieved. "Nothing." "Wait," Evan said. He was pointing at the screen. "What is that? Main Street Capital card?" I looked. "I've never heard of them." "Well, according to Experian, you've had a card with them for 8 years, and you currently have a balance of $4,600. And, oh God, court." "What?" "It's marked as delinquent. 90 days past due." The blood drained from my face. I couldn't breathe. A 90-day delinquency, a high balance, past due account. That wasn't just a black mark. For someone with my security clearance, It was a death sentence. It was grounds for immediate suspension. No, I whispered. That's not possible. I would know. They would have called me. Would they? Evan's fingers were flying across the keyboard. He pulled up the account details. When was this opened? I read the date. 8 years ago. I was 26, a rookie. Just transferred to Port Wyndham. Overwhelmed. Trying to prove myself. Where is the address? My voice was a croak. Where are the statements going? Evan read the address aloud. 12 Oakwood Lane, Port Wyndham. I didn't recognize it. That's not my old apartment. That's not their house. What is that? I don't know, Evan said. He typed the address into a search engine. The result popped up. A small, blurry picture of a corrugated metal building. Leon's Woodworking, private workshop. He hadn't just lied. He hadn't just slandered. He opened a credit card in my name, I said. The words felt like sand in my mouth. 8 years ago, when I was just starting out, he used my social security number. And he's been paying the minimum, Evan said, his voice a low, terrifying growl. He's been paying it for 8 years, keeping it just active enough not to raise flags, until... He didn't need to finish. Until 3 months ago, I said, when I sent the wedding invitations, when I defied him. He hadn't just been angry, he had been waiting. He had this weapon, this financial landmine, buried in my life for almost a decade. And when I finally stepped out of line, he pulled the pin. He stopped paying. He let it go delinquent, knowing it would blow up my life, knowing it would destroy my career. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a demolition. I looked at the screen, at the past due notice, my career, my life, my wings. My training kicked in. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, Arctic calm. This was not a family problem. This was a federal crime. Screenshot it, I said. What? Screenshot every page, the address, the open date, the delinquency, get it all. While he was doing that, I picked up my phone. I didn't hesitate. Main Street Capital, a cheerful automated voice said. I navigated the menus. Fraud, I said, my voice sharp. I need the fraud department. I spent the next hour on the phone. I was not Courtney, the daughter. I was Captain Barry, the federal agent. I gave them my name, my real address, my date of birth. I told them about the fraudulent account. I told them the address it was linked to. And who do you suspect opened this account, ma'am? The woman on the line asked. His name is Leon Barry, I said, my voice perfectly level. And I am filing a formal identity theft affidavit and a police report in the morning. I hung up. The account was frozen. The investigation was open. I sat back, my hands shaking again, but not with fear this time, with rage, a pure, clean, high-octane rage. The phone rang in my hand. It was an unknown number, but local. I almost ignored it. Yeah? I snapped. Courtney? Captain? It's Father Michael. The chaplain. My voice softened immediately. Father, I'm sorry. It's a bad night. I know, child. His voice was kind. I seem to be a magnet for bad nights. He paused. This is highly irregular. I'm not a gossip, you know that. But I just finished a counseling session with a young woman named, well, she's your brother's fiancée. Tyler's fiancée, I said, flatly. The one he's supposed to marry next month, yes, a long, weary sigh. Except, it seems he won't be. The wedding's off. Okay, I said. It was just more data. It seems... Oh, this is such a mess. It seems the $9,200 your father was requesting, it wasn't for a wedding. Courtney, it was to pay off your brother's car loan. He was about to have it repossessed. And, well, it seems there was another fiancé, from last year, who your brother also, borrowed money from, and he's in a great deal of trouble. I said nothing. The $9,200, it was all a lie, all of it. It was just a desperate, ugly grab to cover the favored son's debts. I'm not telling you this to make you happy, Courtney, the chaplain said, his voice sad. I know you're not gloating, but I told her she was strong, and I wanted you to know. It's all collapsing. The lies. They're collapsing. I know, I whispered. Thank you, Father. I hung up. I looked at the dark screen of my phone. I was not happy. I was not sad. I was validated. I went to my desk. I opened a small notebook, the one where I kept my flight logs. I wrote one sentence. Family is not about obedience, it's about respect. Then I thought of my mother, Darla, the ghost in this whole story, the woman who just stood by. I pulled a postcard out of my desk drawer. It was a picture of the Port Wyndham Lighthouse, standing against a storm. I turned it over. I didn't write about the fraud. I didn't write about the police. I didn't write about Tyler. I wrote 4 words. I am thinking of you. I addressed it to her. I put a stamp on it. I set it by the door. It was a flare, shot into the darkness. I had no idea if she'd even see it. The war I had been fighting was loud. It was all engine noise, rotor wash, and screaming wind. Now, the war was over. And the silence was deafening. Summer came to Port Wyndham. It settled over the city, heavy and damp, smelling of low tide and hot asphalt. The squall lines of spring gave way to a thick, predictable humidity. My flight schedule eased. The summer storms were less frequent. The emergency calls fewer. I had time. I had spent my entire adult life using my job as a shield, as an excuse, as an identity. I was Captain Barry. I flew into chaos. I rescued people. I was too busy, too vital, too stressed for a normal life. Now, my enemy had retreated. My father had gone silent after the identity theft report was filed. The credit card company had frozen the account and closed it, sending me a thick packet of legal documents that Evan had given straight to Mrs. Elias. So I woke up on a Saturday morning, the sun streaming in, and there was no emergency, there was no crisis, there was just the day. What do we do? I asked Evan, feeling a prickle of something I could only identify as panic. Well, he said, kissing my temple, I was thinking of going to the farmer's market, and then, I don't know, maybe we could just sit on the balcony. Sit. He was suggesting we just sit. It sounded agonizing. I went. The farmer's market was a riot of noise and color, people, families, dogs, the smell of fresh strawberries and kettle corn. I felt alien, like I was in a foreign country. My flight suit replaced with jeans and a simple t-shirt. I bought tomatoes, their skins warm from the sun. I bought a basil plant. I brought the plant home. I found a pot. I filled it with soil. I watered it. This became my new ritual. Every morning, I woke up, I made coffee, and I watered the basil. I would touch its leaves, smell the sharp, green scent on my fingers. It was an absurdly simple, grounding act. This plant was alive, and I was responsible for it. It was a responsibility that didn't involve a $100 million machine or human lives. It just was. I started saying hello to the elderly couple in 5B, Mr. and Mrs. Groden. I had lived in the building for 3 years and had never learned their names. Now, I found myself stopping to chat by the mailboxes. They told me about their grandchildren. I told them about the weather. It was a normal, human interaction. It felt revolutionary. I was learning to live slowly. I was learning to be a person, not just a pilot. And then, a letter came, in the new post office box. It was not in Leon's sharp, angry print. The handwriting was hesitant, slanted, familiar in a way that ached. It was my mother's. I took it home. I sat at the kitchen table, the basil plant in the window, and opened it. It was the first direct word from her in almost a year. It was short. Courtney, it began. No, dear. Your father is ashamed. He doesn't know how to start. He misses you. Things are hard. Tyler is not well. Your father is not well. He just sits in his workshop. He won't talk. I know you're angry, but he is your father. Please, call home. Darla. I read the letter. He is ashamed. Not, he is sorry. Not, he was wrong. He was ashamed. He was embarrassed. He had lost. His public humiliation was what pained him, not his actions. He doesn't know how to start. He was a principal, a man of letters, of speeches, of rules. He knew how to start. He knew my number. He knew my address. He just didn't want to. He wanted me to start. He wanted me to wave the white flag. Call home. It was not a request. It was the same old tired directive, just wrapped in my mother's passive, weary handwriting. It was an order of surrender. I thought of the postcard I had sent her. I am thinking of you. A flare of empathy, a signal that she was seen, separate from him. Her letter was the response. She was not separate. She was his envoy. I folded the letter. I put it on my desk, right next to the lighthouse postcard. The flare and the reply. We are still here. We have not changed. Come back to us. I did not reply. I went and watered my basil. A week later, I got a call from Commander Briggs. My stomach did the familiar cold plunge, but it was shallower this time. Barry, he grunted. Sir? Just wanted to give you a heads up. We got a final disposition from the State Department. The State Department, sir? Yeah. He sounded annoyed. Your father, apparently, wasn't satisfied with lying to me. He filed a formal complaint with the State Department of Transportation, alleging that the CRA was harboring an unstable pilot, you, and that I was personally negligent for not grounding you. He claimed you were causing him severe psychological damage and harassment. My hand tightened on the phone. He what? Yeah, he's a piece of work. Anyway, I'm calling to tell you that I just got their response. It's my new favorite document. They have officially dismissed the complaint, citing, and I quote, a total lack of merit, evidence, or basic sanity. My name is cleared. Your name is cleared. They also, and this is the best part, they sent your father a letter suggesting that filing false reports against federal agencies is a very, very bad idea. He's been warned. I was silent. Barry, you there? Yes, sir. I realized I was smiling, a small, tight, dangerous smirk. So, it's done, Briggs said. As far as I'm concerned, this file is closed. He's a non-factor. Don't make me regret this. Keep your head clear. It's clear, sir. Thank you. I hung up the phone. He had tried to ground me. He had tried to take my wings, the one part of my life he had never been able to touch. He had gone for the kill shot. And he had missed, completely. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a god. He was just a loud, clumsy, predictable man. And he had just used his last bullet. I felt light. I went to the base gym later that week. I was on the treadmill, running hard, trying to burn off the last of the adrenaline. Captain Barry? I jumped, yanking my earbuds out. Officer Grant, the cop from my lobby, was on the treadmill next to me. He was in his gym clothes, sweating, looking much more human. Officer Grant, I said, slowing my pace. Just Grant, please. We're off the clock. He ran in silence for a minute. Funny seeing you here. You too. He kept running, his eyes on the screen in front of him. I thought you might like to know, he said, his voice casual. Your father came by the precinct last week. My pace faltered. Oh? Yeah, came in, hat in hand, all polite. Said he wanted to clear the air. He officially withdrew his complaint against you, the one from your lobby. He withdrew it, I said. It wasn't a question. Yep. Said it was a terrible misunderstanding during a period of family stress. He said he was worried about you, but that it was all smoothed over, Grant chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. And then he left something for you. Said he knew we'd see you around. He left something with the police? Well, not with them. He left it at the front desk, with the duty sergeant. A piece of paper. A piece of paper. Yeah, the sergeant. He's new. He didn't know what to do with it, so he put it in my mailbox. It was weird. It was a note. Your father. He left you a note. I stopped running. I stepped off the treadmill. What did it say? Grant stopped, too. He grabbed a towel, wiping his face. He looked uncomfortable. It was weird, he said again. It was, I don't know, a business card. I think from his school. And on the back, he'd written, when you sober up, you know the way home. I stared at him. The gym noises, the clang of weights, the whine of the machines, all faded. When you sober up, you know the way home. Sober up, as if my clarity, my new life, my marriage, as if this was a form of intoxication, as if my sanity was a bender I would eventually recover from, and when I did, when I finally hit rock bottom, I would know the way back, home, to him, to the sickness. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, sharp, rusty sound. It was the laugh of a survivor. Officer Grant looked at me, alarmed. Ma'am, Captain? I shook my head, my laughter subsiding into a wide, hard smile. It's fine, Grant. It's fine. It's just, I've been reading different versions of that note my whole life. I just didn't realize it. I picked up my towel. Thanks for the heads up. Enjoy your run. I left him there. I walked back to the locker room, that single sentence echoing, you know the way home. Evan was quiet when I told him, his anger a low, hot pilot light. He's trying to haunt you, Evan said, his voice hard. He's lost all direct lines of attack, so now he's just leaving ghosts. He's leaving these little reminders of his power all over the city for you to trip over. With the cops, with your boss. He's trying to make you feel like you're surrounded. He took my hands. You're walking around like you're expecting the next shot. Court, you're walking like a ghost in your own life. You need to start breathing like you're living. You need to stop haunting his world and start living in yours. He was right. I was still reacting. I was still on his frequency, even if I was just listening for the static. How? I asked. You cut the feed, he said. You don't just block him. You build a wall, a real one, a procedural one. I understood. Procedure. That was a language I spoke. The next day, I sat down with Mrs. Zelias, the lawyer. I paid her a retainer. We drafted a formal, simple letter. It was sent, via certified mail, to my father's house and a copy to his office at the school. It stated, simply, that I was instituting a 30-day period of no active contact, that any and all future communications, from him, from my mother, or from any other party, regarding financial, legal, or personal matters, were to be directed to her, as my legal counsel. It was a cease and desist, but a polite one. I was not just blocking his number, I was blocking him. I was putting a legal boundary between my life and his. For 30 days, a test. The response was immediate, but not from him. It was my cousin Sarah, the one who had unfriended me. A text message. Tyler's wedding is officially canceled. He lost his job. He's a mess. I hope you're happy. You're tearing this family apart. Don't you dare push him any further. I read the text. Tyler, the golden boy, the one all this was for, the $9,200. I had felt no joy at his downfall when Father Michael told me, and I felt no guilt now. I felt light. I showed Evan the text. They're blaming me for his wedding being canceled, for him being a mess. Of course they are, Evan said. You were the support beam, Court, the one they kicked and leaned on and expected to hold up the whole rotten roof, and you just walked away. You refused to be the support, and the whole thing is collapsing. I looked at the text again. Don't you dare push him. I deleted the message. I blocked Sarah's number. I felt light because I realized, in that moment, what forgiveness really was. It wasn't about an apology. It wasn't about a grand reunion. It wasn't about calling home. Sometimes, forgiveness is just refusing to be the wrong kind of support. It's refusing to be the enabler. It's letting people finally, truly, face the consequences of their own choices. I had forgiven my brother by refusing to pay his debts. I had forgiven my mother by refusing to answer her summons. And I was forgiving my father by refusing to play his game and building a wall so high he could never, ever climb it again. The Port Wyndham City atrium was a glass cathedral. It was all sunlight and brushed steel, a place designed for civic pride and sterile handshakes. I hated it. I was in my dress uniform, the stiff dark blue wool a familiar prison, the polished brass on my collar cold against my skin. Evan was in the front row, looking proud and uncharacteristically formal in a suit. My crew from the CRA filled the row behind him. Briggs was there, his arms crossed, looking as impatient as I felt. The mayor, a man with a plastic smile and a voice like a game show host, was droning on. And in a year marked by unprecedented challenges, we are reminded that our city's greatest asset is its people. I tuned him out. I was here because I had to be. The city was giving the entire CRA crew a unit commendation, but they had insisted on pulling one story for the press, my story. A night rescue, in the teeth of a Force 10 squall. The mayor continued, reading from his teleprompter. The fishing vessel Odyssey, sinking fast, 20 miles offshore, and a crew, led by our next honoree, who refused to give up, ladies and gentlemen, for the rescue of 4 fishermen from certain death, Captain Courtney Barry. Polite applause. I stood, my back straight, my gaze fixed on a point just above the mayor's head. I walked to the small stage, the applause feeling distant and thin. This was my job. They gave you a medal for the same reason they court-martialed you. Paperwork. I reached the podium. The mayor was holding a glass plaque. The small local news cameras were on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I started. My voice clipped. She's a thief! The voice was not just a sound. It was a physical blow, a shockwave that hit me in the chest and stopped my lungs. It was Leon. He was at the back of the atrium, marching down the main aisle. The 200 people in the room, council members, press, my colleagues, all turned. He was not alone. He was, once again, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. He was weaponizing the law, trying to use it as his personal battering ram. That woman is a criminal, he roared, pointing his finger at me. She stole $9,200 from my family. Officers, I told you, she's right there. Do your duty. The room dissolved into a sea of confused, shocked murmurs. The cameras, smelling blood, swung from me to my father. Commander Briggs was on his feet in an instant, moving to intercept. Leon, what in the hell do you think you're doing? This is a city function. It's a public hearing, Leon bellowed, shoving past him. He was a man possessed, his face purple with rage. I am a citizen, filing a complaint. She is a liar and a thief. The 2 officers he'd brought looked mortified. They were young, and they had clearly been told this was a simple civil matter, not a public ambush. They were just trailing in his wake. He was 10 feet from the stage. He had made it. He had cornered me. He had brought his war to my sanctuary. I looked at him, at this raging, desperate man, and I felt that familiar, beautiful, Arctic cold calm settle over me. I was not his daughter. I was not his victim. I was Captain Courtney Barry, and he had just invaded my operational area. I kept my hand on the podium microphone. The pop of the live mic silenced the room. Mr. Mayor, I said, my voice steady, amplified, cutting through the chaos. I must apologize for this interruption. This man is my father, Leon Barry. He is unwell. I gave him one last chance to be seen as sick, not criminal. He ignored it. I am not unwell. You are a disgrace. Very well, I said into the microphone. I turned my head, not to him, but to the small audio-visual booth in the back of the atrium. Gary, I called out, my voice booming. You have the file I emailed you this morning? The one labeled Presentation Backup? Gary, the AV tech, squinted at me, confused. Yes, Captain? Please project the file doorbell.mp4 onto the main screen, audio at 75%. What? Leon stopped, his fury momentarily checked by confusion. What are you doing? Briggs, seeing I had a plan, stepped in front of my father. That's far enough, Leon. The giant screen above the stage, which had been showing the city seal, flickered to black. The entire atrium was silent, holding its breath. Then, the screen lit up, a grainy, blue-tinted, wide-angle video. My apartment lobby. This, I narrated, my voice echoing in the hall, is footage from 3 weeks ago, the first time my father tried to use the police as a weapon. The room watched, mesmerized, as the video played. They saw my father, red-faced, jabbing his finger. They heard him screaming at Officer Grant. They heard every word. It's a flagrant disregard. I am her father. She owes this family. Then they heard my voice from the video, a clear counterpoint. I don't owe silence. They saw Evan appear. They saw the police, embarrassed, escorting my father out. They heard his final, snarled question. Your rank, that's what makes you right? The video ended. The screen went black. My father, I continued into the microphone, has been lying. He claimed I stole $9,200. This was a lie to cover the extensive personal and financial debts of my brother, Tyler. I pressed a button on the laptop at the podium. The screen changed. It was a PDF, a financial document. This, I said, pointing, is a credit report, pulled 2 weeks ago. It shows a fraudulent line of credit. It was opened 8 years ago, using my name and my social security number, without my knowledge or consent. A collective, sharp intake of breath from the crowd. This was no longer a family spat. This was a federal crime. The billing address for this secret, fraudulent account, I continued, my voice cold and precise, was 12 Oakwood Lane, Port Wyndham, the registered address of my father's private woodworking shop. I let that land. The 2 officers who had arrived with Leon were now looking at him, not as a victim, but as a suspect. This account was kept in good standing for 8 years, a financial landmine, until the month I got married against his wishes, at which point he stopped paying, allowing it to become delinquent, knowing it would be grounds to revoke the security clearance required for my job. I looked at the press cameras, which were now aimed solely at me. He did this in an attempt to have me grounded, professionally and financially. He also filed a false anonymous complaint with my commander, which was dismissed. He then filed a false complaint with the State Department of Transportation, which was also dismissed, and for which he was warned about harassing a federal agency. My father's face was ashen. He was trapped, illuminated, his lies stripped bare one by one. And finally, I said, the matter of the $9,200. Evan stood up. He walked to the stage, calm as ever, and handed me a single, folded piece of paper. I took it. This is the only, and I repeat, the only financial transaction I have had with my father in the last year. I placed the paper on the document projector at the podium. The screen changed one last time. It was my bank statement. A single line item, blown up for the entire room to see. Transfer to Leon Barry, amount $100,000. Memo, best wishes. A single sharp laugh erupted from the back of the room. It was Marta, then another. The tension broke, not in anger, but in absurdity. The entire, massive, violent, public confrontation was over $1. I turned to the 2 officers who had come with Leon. Their faces were red. Officers, I said, I apologize that you were misinformed and dragged into this domestic matter. Your colleagues have already warned Mr. Barry. This is harassment. He is in violation of a formal legal request to cease and desist, which was delivered to him by my counsel. The senior officer stepped forward, his hand on his radio. He was done. Captain Barry, our apologies. We were not given the full context. Mr. Barry, you are not free to go. You need to come with us and answer some questions. Now." "No!" Leon roared. A final desperate burst of defiance. "It's all lies. She faked it. The video is fake. The bank." But he was cut off by a sound I had not heard in years. A wail, a raw, broken, human sob. In the third row, half hidden behind a pillar, was my mother, Darla. She was on her feet, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She was not looking at me. She was looking at her husband. "That's enough," she choked out, her voice a ragged whisper that nonetheless seemed to fill the entire atrium. "Leon, enough. It's just enough." That was the end. Not the police, not the evidence. Her withdrawal of support. It was the final, load-bearing wall, and it had just collapsed. Leon Barry deflated. The rage, the fire, the righteousness, it all vanished, leaving a gray, stooped, empty old man. The two officers took his arms. He did not resist. He just stared at his wife. The mayor, looking like he'd aged 10 years, stepped back to the mic. "Well, in light of..." I held up my hand, stopping him. "Mr. Mayor," I said, my voice quiet now, but still carrying. "I am not pressing criminal charges today. My father needs help." I gave them that narrative, a thread of dignity to cover the disgrace. "But I will be petitioning the court for an emergency, non-contact restraining order, effective immediately, and I am formally requesting that any and all defamatory and slanderous content posted online by him or his associates be removed within 24 hours, or a civil suit will be filed." I looked out at the room, my crew, my husband, the press. "I apologize again for this disruption. Thank you." I put the microphone down in its cradle. And then, Mrs. Groden from 5B, who was in the audience for some reason, began to clap, a slow, steady, respectful applause. Then Briggs, then Evan, then the entire room. They were not clapping for the rescue. They were clapping for the defense, for the cold, clean procedural dismantling of a bully. The mayor was holding the glass plaque out to me, his expression pleading. "Captain, your award." I looked at it. The Citizens' Heroism Award. It felt small, unimportant. I shook my head, just once, and stepped back from the podium, away from the light. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor," I said, my voice off mic, for him alone. "But I think I should step back. My main job is saving people. That's the part that matters. I'll pick this up later." I walked off the stage, past Evan, past my clapping, cheering crew, and out the side exit into the bright, quiet afternoon. I needed air. The storm had finally, truly passed. The day after the awards ceremony, the city was quiet. My name, which had been all over the local Port Wyndham feed, was already fading, replaced by a story about a zoning dispute. The world moved on. The world always moves on. I did not. I was in a holding pattern, circling, waiting for the ground to stop rushing up at me. I was at home, sitting on the balcony, watching the heat rise off the rooftops. I had my basil plant, which was now thriving, and a cup of cold coffee. I was just existing. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, buzzed. I heard it, a faint, angry vibration, but I didn't move. It was Evan who retrieved it. He stood in the doorway of the balcony, his face unreadable. "It's not your father," he said. I nodded. My father was, for all intents and purposes, gone. His professional life was in ruins. The school board had convened an emergency meeting after the news reports. He was facing an investigation. The police were building a case, independent of me, for the identity theft. He was no longer a threat. He was just wreckage. "It's from your mother," Evan said, and my stomach, which I had thought was finally settling, did a slow, sick roll. He held out the phone. I took it. A text from Darla, from my mother, who had not spoken, who had not acted, who had simply been a ghost in the machine, a ghost who had, at the last possible second, begun to weep. The text was short. It was everything I expected and nothing I wanted. Your father is tired. He won't say sorry. He can't. But he is tired. He is so tired. Courtney. He's just done. I read the words. He is tired. Not, he is remorseful. Not, he is wrong. He was tired. His war of annihilation against me had been exhausting, and now he was spent. And this text, I knew, was a summons. It was the last, desperate attempt. It was my mother, the eternal enabler, the silent partner, calling the sensible one, the responsible one, to come and clean up the final, emotional mess, to come and manage my father's fatigue, to come and make him feel better about his own destruction. I set the phone down on the concrete of the balcony. He's tired, I said to Evan. And you're not? He asked, his voice rough. I didn't have an answer. I stood up. I'm going for a walk. Court. I just need to see the water. I walked out of the apartment, out of the clean, safe building, and toward the harbor. I needed the salt, the grit, the noise. I needed the smell of creosote and old fish. I walked until I was at the end of the public pier, the long, splintered wooden structure that jutted out into the bay. I stood at the railing, watching the container ships being loaded under the massive, skeletal cranes. It was night. The harbor was alive with light. The red and green channel markers blinked in the darkness. Far out, a lighthouse swept its beam across the water. Blink, blink, pause, blink. It was a language, a Morse code for lost ships. It was telling them where the rocks were. It was telling them how to get home. I stood there for, and I don't know how long, an hour, 2, just watching the lights. They were not a call for help. They were a statement of fact. Here is the boundary. Here is the danger. Here is the way through. He was tired, was I? I was not tired. I was empty. I had emptied myself of the rage, the fear, the desperate need for his approval. I had flown the mission. I had burned all my fuel, and I was gliding. I felt a presence beside me. Long before he spoke, Evan, he had followed me. He just appeared and stood next to me, his hands in his pockets, also watching the water. He didn't crowd me. He just anchored me. If you go, he said, his voice quiet, almost carried away by the wind. It's not for him. I know. And it's not for her. I know. He turned, leaning his back against the railing, looking at me. If you go, you're not a life raft. Court, you're not going to save them. They are a sinking ship, and they have been for 30 years. They will pull you under. So I don't go, I said, my voice flat. I didn't say that, he said. I'm just saying, you go. You hold on to your own life vest. You go for you. You go because you have a final piece of data you need to collect. You go because you need to sign the logbook. But you do not, under any circumstances, get in the water with them. I looked at him. My husband, this man who understood my procedural soul better than I did. Sign the logbook. Okay, I said. I'll go. I pulled out my phone. I didn't text my mother. I didn't text him. I texted Mrs. Elias, my lawyer. They are requesting a meeting. I am willing to meet. One time, on my terms. She texted back, almost instantly. When? Where? What terms? I typed them out, my conditions, the checklist for this final, dangerous approach. 1. No police. This was not a negotiation for his legal future. This was a statement of my personal boundaries. 2. No money. This was not about the theft, or the $9,200, or any other number. This was not a settlement. 3. No orders, no directives, no summons. And I added, not at my home, not at his, neutral territory, my choice. She replied, understood, I will arrange it. Where? I looked around the dark, cold harbor. No, not here. I thought of Father Michael. The community room, at the base chapel, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. It was a perfect choice. It was a sterile, quiet, neutral box, and it was on my territory. He would have to come onto my base, onto my ground, to see me. The next morning, I did not put on my fatigues. I did not put on my jeans. I put on my formal, Class A dress uniform, the dark wool, the polished brass, the ribbons, including the new one, the one I had never picked up, which Briggs had quietly delivered to my home. Evan walked me to the car. He kissed me. "Remember," he said, "your vest." "My vest," I said. The chapel was empty when I arrived. Father Michael was there, in his office. He just nodded at me, his eyes full of a sad, quiet understanding. "The room is open. Captain, they are on their way." "You don't have to stay, Father," I said. "I'm not here for them, child," he said. "I'm just here." I walked into the community room. It was beige carpet, beige walls, a long laminate table, and a dozen stacking chairs. It smelled of stale coffee and old hymnals. It was perfectly agonizingly neutral. I sat at the head of the table. I did not move. I waited. At 10:03, the door opened. They entered, not as a couple, but as two separate, broken people. My mother, Darla, looked small. She was gray. Her hair, her skin, her clothes. She looked like a photocopy of herself. She saw me, in my full uniform, and flinched, looking away. He entered behind her. Leon. The change was shocking. The man who had roared in the atrium, the man who had screamed in my lobby, he was gone. This man was old. His suit hung on him. His face was slack. His eyes were puffy and red. He looked defeated. He looked tired. He stopped when he saw me. He just stood in the doorway, his eyes tracing the uniform, the bars, the ribbons, the wings. He was not seeing me. He was seeing a lifetime of his failure. He spoke, his voice not a roar, but a dry, cracked rasp. "You're still in uniform." It was a clumsy opening. It was not an apology. It was not a greeting. It was just an observation, a stupid, broken observation. I did not stand. I did not move. "Always," I said. My voice was low, clear. They sat, not at the table with me, but in the chairs against the far wall, as if they were in a principal's office, as if they were the ones being disciplined. The power, in this beige, sterile room, was entirely, finally, mine. My mother just stared at her hands, which she was twisting in her lap. "Leon." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw no anger, no righteousness, no control. I just saw a void. He started. He stopped. He cleared his throat. The school board, they asked for my resignation." "I know," I said. "Tyler," he tried again. He's in a program. A treatment program." "I know." The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the ventilation. This was it. This was the great, final confrontation, and it was just pathetic. He looked down at his own hands. I lost control. It was the admission, but it was not the one I needed. "You never had control, Dad," I said, and the word Dad tasted like ash in my mouth. "You just had obedience, and it wasn't enough for you, so you tried to break me. You thought I was your soldier." He looked up, his eyes, for the first time, wet, not crying, just filled. "You were—" "No," I said. "I was yours. I was your daughter. And you were my commanding officer. And I am no longer under your command." It was a statement of fact, a discharge, a final, honorable, procedural separation. He had no response to that. He just nodded. He had nothing left to fight with. No police, no money, no orders. I stood up. The meeting was over. "Courtney," my mother whispered, her voice a plea. She had not said a word. Don't go." I looked at her. "I'm not going anywhere. Mom, I'm right here. I've been here. You are the one who has to decide where you're going." I turned to my father. "The restraining order will be filed. The legal process will continue. This doesn't change that. This was just a courtesy. So you could see." "See what?" he whispered. "That I'm fine," I said, "and that I'm done." I walked to the door. I did not touch them. I did not hug them. "Leon," my mother said. Her voice was sharp, not at me, at him. He looked at her, confused. "Get up," she said. She was standing. Her hands were no longer twisting. They were balled into fists. "She said she's done, so we're done. Get up." She had, in that one moment, changed sides. She had made her choice. She was not leaving with me, but she was no longer standing with him. She was standing for herself. It was the most shocking thing I had ever seen. He stood, slowly, like an old man. They left. They walked out of the room, not together, but one after the other. I watched them go. There was no victory. There was no sadness. There was just a conclusion. The war was over. There were no hugs, but there was no more fighting. I went back to the table. I sat down. I looked at the beige wall. Father Michael appeared in the doorway. He just looked at me. I pulled a pen from my uniform pocket. I pulled a set of folded papers from my breast pocket. The formal petition for the restraining order. The final, legal, binding document. I uncapped the pen. I signed my name. Courtney Barry Mercer, Captain. I was signing my own logbook. The flight was over. I was on the ground, and I was safe. The hearing was in a small, windowless room in the sub-basement of the Port Wyndham City Hall. It was not a courtroom. It was an administrative chamber, smelling of stale coffee and old waxed linoleum. There were no spectators, just a long scratched table under fluorescent lights. I was there, in my dress uniform. Evan was beside me. Mrs. Elias, my lawyer, was at my other side, her files stacked in 3 neat, organized piles. At the other end of the table sat my father. He looked small, his bravado, his rage, his principal's authority. It had all been stripped away. He was just a graying man in a suit that no longer fit him. He had a court-appointed lawyer, a young, exhausted-looking man who kept rubbing his eyes. My mother was not there. The magistrate, a sharp-faced woman named Judge Alito, looked at the clock. Case 2024 F-119. Petition for a permanent restraining order and relief from defamation. Barry Mercer versus Barry. Mrs. Elias, you have the floor. Please be brief. I have a full docket. Mrs. Elias stood. She was not brief. She was, however, lethally efficient. Your Honor, she began, her voice crisp. We are here to establish a pattern of escalating harassment, identity theft, and professional sabotage. This is not a family dispute. It is a calculated campaign. She started with the evidence. I submit Exhibit A, video footage from the petitioner's private doorbell camera, dated October 12th, showing the respondent, Mr. Leon Barry, trespassing in a private building and attempting to leverage law enforcement to intimidate my client. She pushed a laptop toward the judge. Exhibit B, a certified bank statement, showing a $1 transfer, refuting the respondent's public and false claim of a $9,200 theft. Exhibit C, she continued, her voice hardening. A full credit file from all 3 major bureaus, documenting a fraudulent line of credit opened in my client's name, using her Social Security number, 8 years ago, and I submit, as Exhibit C-1, proof that the billing address for this fraudulent account was the respondent's private workshop. Leon's lawyer put his head in his hands. Exhibit D, server logs from the Coastal Response Authority, documenting an anonymous, defamatory letter sent to my client's commanding officer, intended to revoke her security clearance. The IP address of this email, Your Honor, has been traced by forensics to a public computer, but the email account itself was created and accessed multiple times from a home network registered to Mr. Leon Barry's workshop. The judge looked up from the file, her gaze landing on my father like a physical weight. "Counselor," she said to his lawyer, "this is extensive. Do you have any response at all?" Leon's lawyer sighed. "Your Honor, Mr. Barry was under emotional distress. He believed he was owed." "We are not done, Your Honor," Mrs. Elias said. "We have a witness." "This is not a trial," the judge snapped. "A witness who has voluntarily submitted a sworn affidavit and wishes to speak to his own involvement. We call Tyler Barry." My father's head snapped up. His eyes, for the first time, showed a spark of terror. The door opened, and my brother shuffled in. He looked ravaged. He was thin, pale, his eyes darting. He was sworn in, his hand trembling. Mrs. Elias was gentle. "Mr. Barry, why did your father demand $9,200 from your sister?" Tyler stared at his feet. It was me," he whispered. "I owed money, my car. I was in debt. I told him to. I told him to make her pay. I told him to force her." "Why would you do that?" "Because," Tyler mumbled, and now he was weeping. "Because he promised he would forgive the other loan, the one I was paying." "What other loan?" Mrs. Elias asked, though I knew she already had the answer. The workshop," Tyler choked out. The card, the secret card. He told me about it years ago. He said it was our family's backup. He made me pay the interest on it. For years. He said it was my debt. And he promised if I helped him get Courtney back in line, he would forgive it. It was a revelation that hit me like a physical blow, a new, sickening layer. He hadn't just used me. He had used my brother, too. He had enslaved his own son with his fraud. "And one more thing, Your Honor," Mrs. Elias said, sliding a final folder across the table. "This is a mortgage application filed by Mr. Barry 5 years ago for that same workshop. He was denied. He refiled 2 weeks later, with a cosigner. That cosigner was Captain Barry." The judge opened the file. She read. Her face went from gray to white. This is a professional letter of recommendation, on CRA letterhead, guaranteeing her salary, and a signature." She looked at me. "Is this your signature, Captain?" "No, Your Honor." She looked at Tyler. "Mr. Barry?" Tyler just shook his head, sobbing. "He practiced it. He said it was just a formality. He said it was just to help the family." The judge closed the folder. She took off her glasses. She looked at my father, Leon, who was now just a shell, staring at the laminate table. "Mr. Barry," the judge said, her voice a low, dangerous blade. "You forged your daughter's signature, a federal officer's signature, on a bank loan application. You committed identity theft. You filed false complaints. You are a menace." She picked up her gavel. "This hearing is over. The petition for a permanent restraining order is granted, in full, for the maximum allowable period, 100-yard exclusion. You will not contact, harass, or communicate with the petitioner or her husband in any way, directly or indirectly. You will remove or cause to be removed any and all defamatory content online within 24 hours, or you will be held in contempt and you will go to jail. And I am referring this entire file, all of it, to the District Attorney's Office for a full criminal investigation into identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud." She looked at Leon's lawyer. "Get him out of my sight." It was over. Leon's lawyer was trying to get him to stand, but I stood up first. "Your Honor?" The judge looked at me, annoyed. Yes, Captain Barry. I thought I gave you everything you wanted. Almost, Your Honor. I am not asking for him to be prosecuted. The room went completely silent. Mrs. Elias looked at me like I was insane. My father slowly raised his head, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic hope. What? The judge said. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, my voice clear and strong in the small, dead room. I'm not asking for damages. I don't want his money. I don't want him in jail. He is beaten. I just want this to be over. I want to be safe. The judge stared at me. He committed multiple prosecutable felonies, Captain. I know, I said, but I have a different request. Instead of criminal prosecution, I'm listening. First, I request a mandatory, permanent credit lock and fraud alert be placed on my Social Security number, linked to this case, so this can never happen again. Second, I request that the city, in lieu of the DA's resources, allocates a small fund for a class, a public education workshop, right here in City Hall, a class on identifying and surviving financial abuse within families. The judge was silent for a full minute. She looked at me, at my father, at the files. A class? She repeated. And who exactly would teach this class? I would, I said. I'll volunteer. I'll provide the expert testimony. The judge looked at my father, who was now just crying, silently, the tears of a broken, beaten tyrant. Mr. Barry, she said, you are, without question, the luckiest man in Port Windham. Your daughter has just handed you a gift you do not deserve. The civil orders stand, absolutely. The criminal referral will be held, pending my discretion and pending the establishment of this public fund. She looked at me. Your request is granted. Captain, we are done. The hallway outside was bright, the marble echoing. A local reporter, the same young woman from the awards ceremony, rushed up to me, a microphone extended. Captain, we heard. You won. How does it feel? How does victory feel? I stopped. I looked at her eager, hungry face. Victory? I said. This wasn't a war. There was no victory. I didn't win anything. But the judge. I regained my boundary, I said. That's all. I just got my line back. I walked past her, leaving her confused. I felt hollow, not happy, not sad, just empty. Evan was waiting for me. He didn't say a word. He didn't hug me. He just held out a bottle of water. My hands were shaking. I took it, my fingers fumbling with the cap. I drank. The water so cold it hurt my chest. It felt like the moment the rotors stop spinning, the bone-jarring vibration that you've lived with for hours. It just ceases, and the silence is the only thing you can feel. I leaned against the marble wall, catching my breath. I'll be at the first one. The voice was a whisper. I looked up. My mother, Darla. She was standing 20 feet away. She had been there, in the back of the hallway, the whole time. Her face was a wreck of tears, but her eyes were clear. What? I said. The class, she said, her voice rough. The one you're going to teach. About that. I'll be at the first one. I need to learn. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to come back. She made a promise to herself. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a happy ending. It was just a door, which had been nailed shut for my entire life, opening just a single, tiny crack, but it was enough. She looked at me, held my gaze for one long, silent second, then she nodded, once, and walked away, down the hall, alone. That night, the mayor's aide brought the glass plaque to my apartment, the Citizen's Heroism Award. I took it. I thanked him. I stood in my living room, the heavy, cold glass in my hands. Evan was watching me. I walked over to the small shelf where I kept my flight medals, my achievements, the proof of my competence. I set the award down, and then I took the folded, certified copy of the restraining order, the final legal document. I unfolded it, and I placed it on the shelf, right next to the Heroism Award. The medal for saving them, the court order for saving myself. They were equal. They were both. My credentials. Proof of a job done. The sun was setting over the harbor, turning the water to bruised gold. I stood on the balcony, zipping up my flight suit. My shift started in an hour. The air was cool. A foghorn sounded, a low, long, mournful sound that I had always found comforting. The lighthouse started its patient, steady sweep. Here is the danger. Here is the way through. Evan came out, handing me a hot mug of coffee. You ready, Captain? I took the mug. I watched the light. I felt light, as if I had been flying for 34 years with a heavy, unbalanced, invisible cargo, and I had finally set it down. Peace, I said, the steam from the coffee warming my face. It's not a trophy. It's not something you win. It's a discipline. It's a checklist you run every single day. I kissed my husband. I picked up my bag, and I walked into my new shift, my new life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts on Courtney's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want to support us further, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.